Hi, I'm Johnny.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
Our identity group we have chosen is Pacific Island women. We believe that they are underrepresented in today's society.
This presentation illustrates some facts and figures on different aspects such as ideology, power, and identity. Capitalism is the social system which now exists in all countries of the world. Under this system, the means for producing and distributing goods are owned by a small minority of people, the capitalist class. The capitalists live off of profits that they obtain from exploiting the working class whilst reinvesting some of the profits for further accumulation of wealth. The capitalist system's tendency to reorganize the economy on a global scale to its own profit has direct repercussions on gender and ethnicity relations. The capitalist system feeds on pre-existing system of oppression. For example, the oppression of women is a tool which enables capitalists to manage the entire workforce to their own profit, meaning that when they need extra labour they call upon women who may pay less than men. In 2003, the Strategic Social Policy Group released a report outlining the number of indicators which show the inequality of Pacific women in paid work and economic standards of living. There is a growing gap between Pacific women and the European population, as they are disproportionately represented in social indicators. The report states that the median weekly earnings have had no improvement and are worsening for the situation of Pacific women. Statistics show that the average hourly wage for female Pacific people is at its lowest in comparison to other ethnicities. For example, in 2017, it was recorded as low as $19.72, while female European women were earning around $23.97 on average. As well as this, Pacific women are also lower represented in lower skill occupations that are more susceptible to job losses in harsher economic environments.
Racism can be defined as a system of dominance, power, and privilege based on racial group designations, rooted in historical oppression of a group defined or perceived by dominant group members as inferior, divergent, or undesirable, occurring in circumstances where members of the dominant group create or accept their social privilege by maintaining structure, ideology, values, and behaviour that is in effect of leaving non-dominant group members relatively excluded from power, esteem and status or equal access to societal resources. Dr. Melanie Shiley, a Pacific Island female lecturer at AU, has shared her story about her personal experience with racism, and I quote, "For me as a child, it was me being the first to the shop counter but always the last to be served by Palangi shopkeepers, and at secondary school never being picked for answers by the teachers even though I had my hand up the longest." According to New Zealand General Social Survey conducted in 2008, 6% of the respondents, an estimated 187,000 New Zealanders, believed racial discrimination was the reason for them being treated unfairly or unfavourably.
According to a report conducted by McKinsey and Company, companies have prescriptive that they are a gender diversity, but in reality, they have not made any progress at the women at all. Women continue to be underrepresented and even worse for other races, including the Pacific women's. In terms of entry levels, women earn more bachelor degree than men. However, they are less likely to be hired and far less likely to be promoted to manager. With 62% men in the manager level job and 38% by women, women are also faced with everyday discrimination, sexual harassment, and experience of being the only women in the room. Sexual harassment continues to take place in the workplace, with 55% of women in senior leadership, 48% of lesbian women, and 45% of women in technical field reports. They would often receive sexist jokes and even be touched in sexual ways. Though 89% of companies have policies that do not tolerate sexual harassment, but female employees think they are failing to keep up with the policy.
There's a whole lot of power that influences the role of women in the labor force. Why, you may ask? The underlying cause of lack in contribution to the labor force by women began since the existence of men. Women in the olden days were always ruled and dominated by men, and this domination and patriarchal act were accepted and carried out in all the decision-making among an average household. Whether the decision-making is made up on who cooks and cleans for the household or any other important decisions. From June 2016, the women labor force participation rate rose steadily from 54.6% to 64.5%. In contrast, male participation has been relatively flat and fluctuating at around 74%. This stat is a clear indication that the upward trend of women's participation in the labor force signals the shift of power from male domination and lean towards the inequality trend between men and women in the workplace. The 54.6% stats have only risen by 3.2% in the last 8 years, making it 57.8% participation in 2016. Although the trend of a slight increase in the participation of women in the workforce is similar in all ethnicities such as Pākehā, Māori, and Asian population, it is important to acknowledge that the participation of Pacific women in this labor force is still the lowest among all ethnicities. Can this trend be criticized using the idea of patriarchy? Maybe. Although no clear justification, it is important to see this trend in a wider picture and understand that Pacific women are expected to give a significant amount of importance to the well-being of their family and raising children. The idea that men will be the provider of the household is still carried out in many households. Women of Pacific are greatly influenced in their likelihood of living in an extended family household, and therefore requires a large amount of output towards household chores and daily activities. Ministry of Women 2016 states that in 1986, 21.6% of women stayed at home to look after children, and this has now fallen to 13.9% women at home by the end of 2016. Ministry of Women 2016 also states that more and more Pacific women are giving importance to tertiary education and therefore able to give more into the society. Women of Pacific also gives a lot of importance to Pacific traditions along with strong family and religious commitments, thus suggesting that Pacific women are now able to participate in the workforce at a greater rate.
In 1933, Elizabeth McCombs was the first white woman to be elected into Parliament. This was a monumental moment for women as a whole. Fast forward 66 years later, the first Pacific woman was elected into Parliament. Long before this, Pacific women were already integrated into the New Zealand system, so why did it take so long for this achievement? Pacific women are the lowest hourly wage in comparison to female Asians, female Europeans, and female Māori, and have been at the bottom since 2009. Despite the increase of wages over the years, it is evident that there is a distinction in the societal roles. With the New Zealand school system, 73% of all teachers are Pākehā, 80% of school management and leadership positions are held by Pākehā, and 73% of all teachers are females. There is substantial evidence which shows that this system is failing Māori and Pacific boys and girls, especially, and this is due to the misunderstanding of the reality of diversity. Has the system already aided the lack of privilege Pacific women are already facing?
Social construction of Pacific women regarding gender roles. Traditionally, Pacific women are raised to bring up children and stay home. Pacific women whose lives revolve around reproductive and productive roles in the context of a subsistence economy. The maintenance of these primarily domestic functions focus on ensuring that the basic needs of the family supersedes their own individual needs as a woman. This puts a constraint on Pacific women because their responsibility is only limited to these factors, therefore affecting their role in the workforce.